Hi, this is Bob at Goblet Baseball Training Center, and I'm going to do an overview, a very general overview on the top 5 strength training movements for baseball players. Okay? And the nature of the beast here with the YouTube video is it cannot be very specific. Definitely a general layout with some very important concepts. And you know, I try to keep it simple. There's a ton to be said for keeping it simple. Movement patterns and what's best for any one individual. Now that can get a little complex, a little more specific, but for the purposes here, a good overview is in order. And I want to show you these top 5 movements. And in context, the most important thing is like we're off the machines. Okay, we're not doing like leg extensions, leg curls, even hack squats. Some of those things aren't bad. Leg press, definitely not bad. But what you lose in a machine is one of the most important things that baseball demands, and that's transverse plane movement, transverse plane stability. Right? Baseball is a lot of rotational movement, hitting and throwing, even running to some extent is rotational. And when you're locked into the machine, you lose that component. That's one of the main things that free weights have to offer. We're not swinging barbells and heavy weights in these big, like in a whirlwind here. But what I do want you to focus on is practicing very good control of transverse plane movement, right? This is the transverse plane, like this, right? Rotation, that's transverse plane, right? Frontal plane, this, okay? Sagittal plane, most all weight training exercise traditionally is sagittal plane movement. But we want to incorporate the transverse plane. One of the best ways to do that is with single leg movement, right? For the upper body, unilateral push and pull. For the lower body, unilateral push and pull. When you're on one leg, there's a good argument that almost all athletes benefit tremendously from working on single leg push and pull while they're keeping their core in a good neutral position. So with that said, let's get started with a few general overview with a few good ideas for strength training for baseball. The first thing is that you should learn to squat well. There's no substitute for that. It's not particularly unique to baseball players, but you need to learn the idea of sitting your hips low, loading your hips and not just your knees. A lot of athletes they're missing out on one of the most important parts of their body, the most powerful part of your body in your hips, by being quad dominant with their movements when jumping, running, sprinting. And a good way to start with that is a simple goblet squat, okay? One of my favorite movements where you have a load out in front, right? So when I just go from here to there, my core muscles turn on before I even move my legs, right? So you have inherent stability there already. Your abs and lower back are firing when you just push that out a little bit. And if you're new to it, you start with 5 pounds, 10 pounds, that's plenty, right? And then work on keeping your torso upright, but sitting your butt back. And if that's even hard for you, then fine. We start you down here, position everything where you want it, so your knees are not buckling in, chest is upright, neutral, I should say. There's a little bit of a forward tilt here, but neutral, not perfectly upright, okay? And then you're going to pull this off the ground from there, okay? So even if you can only do 5 reps with good form, that's fine, so be it. Lighten up. A lot of reps it may take to learn that movement pattern, but it's well worth it for bigger weights and bigger things to come, okay? We want to just practice doing it well before we practice doing a lot, right? So do it well, 5 reps or so, maybe 10 with a modest weight, and then you maybe move on to barbell squats and just other things, bigger and better things, okay? So there's no substitute for a squat pattern. And likewise, deadlifts, right? This is a hip hinge pattern. It's a little different than a squat because my knees are bending a little bit, not much. It's almost all on the hip, and now my torso tilts by pushing my hips back, right? Hip hinge means you're keeping neutral in your lower back, right? Hinge the hips to get down there, okay? That's a deadlift pattern. And there are a lot of different variations. We like to pull from a hex bar, right? So you're sort of like standing with the inside of the weight. A great way to learn, simple thing too, with a kettlebell, right? Position everything where you want it. When you're down, generate just a little tension and make sure you're not this way, right? We're not squatting. It's not a goblet squat. We're doing this hip hinge. Initiate the movement by folding your hips back, right? My shoulder blades are locked, and then just practice that. And there are different tricks. There's a lot to say on deadlifts. There are deadlift specialists. There's about 1,000,001 good resources on how to deadlift and the progression. But suffice to say, baseball players need to learn to keep their spine neutral and learn a good hip hinge pattern in some variety. Okay? So our first two movements, squats and deadlifts, just a brief overview, but let's move on. One of the best exercises, I think, for just about any athlete is this idea of a split squat. And variations of this are lunges, lunge walks. There's a lot of different ways to do this. But one of the things I love best is to hold a little resistance, and you have one leg back for balance, but most of my push is on the front leg. And the setup is important even here, because you want to manage to drop down into your hip, into my left hip right now, without my knee going out in front, right? So try to load that hip. See what that looks like? Okay, you can do this with a barbell. The weight's up higher, there's more stability demand. But when I do this on one leg, there's a lot of frontal plane stability going on my torso. Okay, so that's one of my favorites, and this is a modest way. You could definitely build up into more weight with this kind of movement. And again, the setup is important, that I'm not sitting back too much into my back leg, but at the same time, I'm not sitting forward too much into my left knee right here. And you'll see, most athletes have one weaker leg that they just feel unstable on. So you don't need to do all kind of balance exercise on a BOSU. Practice really good stability and balance with most of your weight in good alignment on one leg. Okay, so split squats, one of the best things for athletes in general. And now, we talked a little about deadlifts. The fourth exercise I want to just hit on briefly is a single leg deadlift. Okay? Now there's a lot of rotational stability that goes on at the hip and the lower back with this. And if I just demonstrate briefly what it looks like, I have my left leg working, my right arm, a little bit of overload, and I'm going to fold back, get down there, and hinge my hip. If that's hard, my back didn't rotate, right? I didn't rotate. I didn't do anything but hinge at my hip, keep my balance on one leg, and I didn't squat it, I deadlifted it on one leg. The weight's going to be modest for this because of all the stability demand. So you're not going to pull like a lot of weight off the ground with this. But it's very good from the aspect of working the hips and countering that rotation force through your torso. And you know, if you do 6 to 8 reps on each leg, that would be great. I see a lot of trainers coach this with the other leg going back. Now if I do that, that's like a balance exercise. It's not that hard. After you practice, it's really not that hard. You want to sort of keep that right leg down, or I should say the off leg. You don't want to use it like a counterbalance. That's still all your benefit, and it's not that hard. So keep that other leg down on a single leg deadlift. And you'll see many different compensations when you have one side weaker than the other. And it's fine. Cut the weight back, cut your range of motion back. Maybe it starts in my physical therapy office. I have people all the time just start right here, where they begin where they're supposed to end with that very partial range of motion, without rotating, without any funky compensation. And then we add a little medicine ball, maybe 4 or 5 pounds. Position, and then pull it up and go right back into it. So again, progression is an individualized thing. Can't get into that too much, but cut your range of motion back, cut your load back until you establish good control. And then the last thing, number 5, great for baseball players. Lunge variations are great, but I like to do one that's a little more dynamic, where you're moving, and it takes a modest weight. If you hold a weight high like this and just lunge walk with it, you will definitely identify where your weakness is. Through your shoulder girdle, through your hips, through your legs, knees and below. And you want to load the front foot, sink down. Right? Break it up into 2 steps where you load that front leg and sink down. You don't want to have a lot of weight on the leg behind you. That could be hard on your knee. Okay? So those are great. There's a lot of rotational and transverse plane stability demand in doing that. So there you go, 5 things. Try them out. Let us know your feedback. Thanks.